Hi, folks. Thanks for watching my monologue. As America starts to reopen, just remember that guns, etc., never closed. They still have over 10,200 square feet of ammo, firearms, and accessories, including safes, and they remain open for business. Stop by their huge store in Mesa or just click on gunsetcetera.com. And if you like my monologues, please subscribe to 960 The Patriots YouTube channel. Thanks. Welcome back. Happy June 18th, 2020. What a year. Somewhere about now, halfway through. It's a good time to take stock where we are and perhaps whether we are tending, if I can borrow from Abraham Lincoln. We began with an impeachment in 2020. It ended in February, 4 months ago. Does it not seem like 10 years ago? But that was what we were consumed with, just as something awfully toxic was brewing in China. It's not as if it wasn't known. My gosh, the president mentioned it in his State of the Union address before, let me repeat, before the conclusion of his impeachment trial. You can recall that State of the Union was torn up, all of it, by the Speaker of the House, literally torn up. She tore up the economic plans, as well as the shout-outs and awards to heroes, as well as the mentions of victims of terrorism. And she tore up the mention of the coronavirus along with it. The president was, in time, found not guilty, and then, flash, bam, alakazam, we went to the coronavirus. Fear, panic, anger, lockdowns, shutdowns. Millions put out of work. Unemployment skyrocketed. Then, as that was easing up, and as the country was opening up, race wars, riots, judgments, analysis, by the color of skin, and the color of skin only, exclusively. A 180-degree inverse of the civil rights movement, achievements from the 1960s. Anarchism. War against the police. Forced statements of political adherence. Right out of Vladimir Lenin's notion of the cadre or the vanguard. As he wrote, Lenin, quote, "Our task is not to champion the degrading of the revolutionary to the level of an amateur, but to raise the amateurs to the level of revolutionaries," close quote. Never forget where this comes from, please. The notion of forced confession and prostration. Lost in these forced confessions is the entire notion underlying our First Amendment as articulated by even David Souter, that, quote, "since all speech inherently involves choices of what to say and what to leave unsaid, one important manifestation of the principle of free speech is that one who chooses to speak may also decide what not to say. One simply cannot, under our First Amendment principles, compel affirmance of a belief with which one may disagree. The autonomy to control one's own speech and thought is the hallmark and benchmark of a free society. Why else have elections? Why else indeed? You cannot force the statement that 2 + 2 = 5 unless you believe in tyranny, as George Orwell wrote in his novel 1984, which was exactly what the tyrants forced as confession there. And that's yet exactly what the vanguard and its cadre today wants as it grows even larger. The forced statements of things you may not agree with. I read today of a large and prominent Northern California organization that just published to its supporters that it will now require 20% of its board membership to be African American. Keep in mind, California's African American population constitutes 6% of California. But 20%, for some magical reason, is what it will order. I don't know why not 50%. How much you want to bet they won't ask Shelby Steele or Thomas Sowell? They're academics after all, in Northern California. So this idea of pigmentation clearly has its limits, doesn't it? As we well know, Clarence Thomas was never and will never be the hero that Eric Holder or Thurgood Marshall were, or for that matter, a failed candidate for the governorship of Georgia, though his achievements, Thomas's, are, well, if you read them, they're jaw-dropping. Which gets us to now, about halfway through the year. And as I'm mentioning Marshall and Thomas in the Supreme Court, we learned this week, thanks to Republican-appointed justices, that the 1964 Civil Rights Act now includes something its authors never intended, and by the way, would not have passed if it included them. and that an executive order cannot overturn an executive order, something we all thought it could until this morning. Looking at all this, I now have listeners and callers and a lot of friends, some in fairly high places of society, saying to me, "It's over. It's time to go. Let's secede. We're done." To which I say never. No, not here. Do not give in. We need to remember only two people right now, Abraham Lincoln and Winston Churchill. We all say we love them, esteem them, but I ask, are we truly with them? Can we recall for a moment our Winston Churchill in the comminatory days of 1941? Remember what he said, quote, "Never give in, never give in, never, 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 in nothing great or small, large or petty. Never give in except to convictions of honor and good sense. Never yield to force, never yield to the apparently overwhelming might of the enemy. Do not let us speak of darker days, let us speak rather of sterner days. For these are not dark days, these are great days, the greatest days our country has ever lived. And we must all thank God that we have been allowed, each of us according to our stations, to play a part in making these days memorable in the history of our people." It's in 1941. Can we remember, please, our Abraham Lincoln, too? I've quoted at length twice in the past week his medicine for the anarchy in his time, a redounding to studying what George Washington and our founders thought, did, and taught. It's all the medicine we truly need. We say we love our country and its founding. We say we love Lincoln. Repair to it, then. Redound to it. We are not the secessionists. They are. We are not the race baiters. They are. We do not see people as members of tribes. They do. We did not institute Jim Crow. They did. We did not force a violent civil war based on an invented right of putting property in people and redefining our Declaration of Independence. They did. As Lincoln was being inaugurated, there was a movement of people who truly did say, "Not my president," and so distrusted their fellow countrymen and the notion of free elections and democracy that they did secede. They were Democrats. They were slaveholders. To them, Lincoln said, quote, "A disruption of the federal union, heretofore only menaced, is now formidably attempted. I hold that in contemplation of universal law and of the Constitution, the union of these states, those are perpetual. Perpetuity is implied, if not expressed, in the fundamental law of all national governments. It is safe to assert that no government proper ever had a provision in its organic law for its own termination. Continue to execute all the express provisions of our national Constitution, and the Union will endure forever, it being impossible to destroy it except by some action not provided for in the instrument itself. Again, if the United States be not a government proper, but an association of states in the nature of contract merely, can it, as a contract, be peaceably unmade by less than all the parties who made it? One party to a contract may violate it, break it, so to speak, but does it not require all to rescind it if it's to be lawful? He said, acts of violence within any state or states against the authority of the United States are insurrectionary or revolutionary, according to circumstances. This country with its institutions belongs to the people who inhabit it." Close quote. You see, folks, we are not a sick country, no matter how much the left wants to tell us we are sick. Sick with a virus or sick with an indelible stain inherited by racism. Though we are told to panic, though we are told to be afraid of one another because of a virus, please remember, we are told to do so because 1/2 of 1% of the population has a virus that disproportionately affects 15% of the population if they get it. If they get it. 1/2 of 1% of us. A disease that, if they get it, disproportionately negatively affects 15% of us. For that we are to fear one another, all of us. Turn against one another, all of us. Shut down the operations and change all of our entire lives. Stop it. Don't give in. Never give in. Police are the enemy, and racism is our other disease, our other sickness. Speak for yourselves. When was it inherited or passed down? How? Where? My family may have been slaves. They never had them. My family was victim to bigotry. It never exhibited it, at least not as far back as I can reach. My family came here because of bigotry, and my family fought with the uniform of this country in 2 different world wars in Europe and Asia for people it never knew, on continents that had shown bigotry, at least in one case, to my family. Because that's what freedom dictated and necessitated, and because we didn't believe ideology or thinking was determined by geography or race. We fought regimes that thought it was. We are not those regimes. The good and evil that may live inside someone is not a heritable trait. It is trained, taught, and conditioned. I thought that was settled at Nuremberg. There are races in this world and in this country, and the only 2 that matter are the ones Viktor Frankl identified, the race of the decent and the race of the indecent. Never forget that. I've known decent Jews and indecent Jews. I've known decent Christians and indecent Christians. I've known decent Asians and African Americans and indecent Asians and African Americans. Reward the decent. Do what you can for them. The country has done all it possibly could be asked for it on that front. And denounce the indecent. Teach them when they speak and think wrongly. Arrest them when they act wrongly. But don't give up on it, never, ever. Let that be our action just now. We'll get through this. We're not a sick country. We are a beautiful country. And if we must make us medicines of our great revenge to cure our deadly grief, to borrow from Shakespeare, let that medicine be that we will not be cowed. We will not be moved. We will not apologize. We will not surrender. We will teach. We will talk. And we will teach and talk while standing tall. This is our Churchillian moment. Be proud and be not afraid. But whatever you do, to the degree you are able, never give in. Never, ever. I'm Seth Leipson. We'll be right back.